Hello, Tubby and Coos fans. It's me, Candace, back again for another author event. This is our second author event of 6 that we're doing in February. So I'm really excited about all of our author events this month. Go to our website, tubbyandcoos.com, and take a look at our events calendar to see all of our awesome events. But this is our second event. And today I'm talking with Sylvain Neuvel, who is the author of a book called A History of What Comes Next, which I have the advanced review copy of, but the actual book is out now. But this is the first in the Take Them to the Stars series. He's also the author of the Themis Files series, which started with Sleeping Giants, and I know a lot of you have read that series. Sylvain has also been a journalist. He worked in soil decontamination. He sold ice cream in California. He's peddled furniture across Canada. He has a PhD in linguistics from the University of Chicago and taught linguistics in India. And he has also worked as a software engineer, and he's a certified translator, although he does wish he were an astronaut, according to his bio, which you can tell in this book. He also likes to tinker and dabbles in robotics. And I have heard or saw somewhere on the internet that he is at work on an R2-D2 replica. So I think we'll get along just great. So welcome, Sylvain. Thank you for talking to me today.
Thank you, Candace. Thank you so much for having me. I haven't been in New Orleans in decades, so even virtually, I feel good about this. Yes.
Yay! And it is, well, it would be, if it weren't for COVID, it would be Mardi Gras time here. Although now we're not doing any of that, but it is a fun time of year in New Orleans, for sure.
Yeah, I live in New Orleans at Mardi Gras. It's even better.
Yeah. Exactly. So this R2-D2 replica, did you actually build it? Are you working on it? Like what?
No, I it's complicated. I started building it. I have like parts of it, and I thought when my wife got pregnant, I thought, let me stop all this because baby. And eventually I thought to myself, well, I could have him work on it. It would be cool. It would be like the ultimate geek father and son project. And I set it aside, and things happen. He's 11 now, so he could do things, right? But we're at a stage where like the Dremel is involved in blades and power tools, so he's a little worried about it. But we're working on it. So we're getting back to R2 as soon as we can. I also started building. I build costumes. I have a Darth Vader that's on a mannequin right now that I can wear. I have a Grandizer, a giant robot. And I started building this samurai stormtrooper that is going to be so awesome.
That sounds really cool.
But I will also have to wait. So I'll finish writing the trilogy, and then I'll take a few weeks of doing just nerd stuff and finish building that samurai stormtrooper.
Yeah, that sounds amazing. I hope you post pictures of that when you're done, because I want to see it.
I will.
So tell us a little bit more about this book, A History of What Comes Next. And it's going to be a trilogy, correct?
Yeah.
It's a first book in a trilogy. So tell us a little bit about it and the kibsu. I hope I'm saying that correctly.
You are.
Great. I've only ever seen it written down. And so tell us a little bit more about it and what inspired you to write this trilogy.
All right. Well, so first, a little bit about the series. It's about the kibsu. They're these super badass women that have been around for about 3,000 years, 3,200 years, to be precise. And they come in pairs, always a mother and a daughter, kind of like the Sith, the master and the apprentice. But there's always two of them, and they've been messing with history for the past 3,000 years, trying to get us to the stars before, well, we all die in the most horrible way. And this book, The History of What Comes Next, is set at the very end of the Second World War. It begins in 1945, so we're at the end of the war and in the earliest days of the space race. And they are interacting with known people like Werner von Braun, German scientists who built the ship that took Americans to the moon, and Sergei Korolev, who ran the Soviet space program. So they're a part of our history that we know, and they're messing with it, trying to nudge us forward as best they can, while dealing with a bunch of other things, from personal problems to absolutely horrible people who've been trying to kill him for 3,200 years. So that's about it. And the inspiration for it, I don't know. I mean, it started with the characters, I think. The Themis Files, for those who read it, is sort of a multi-generational story. It takes place over like 20 odd years. But I wanted more. I wanted characters who could exist pretty much any time in history. So I could have them, like, deal with the Romans and deal with, space age stuff and whatnot. So then you have two choices. They can be immortal, which I didn't want to do. Or there could be something unique about them. And then I got this idea of these women who well, they'll have men in their lives at one point or another, but they pass on all their genetic material to their daughters. So they're essentially cloning themselves over and over again. And so it was like the best of both worlds, because I could have, in a way, the same character at any time in history. And at the same time, well, genetics isn't everything. So these people are born in a different place. They experience different things. And so they have their very unique personalities. But at their core, they all have a little bit in common. So once I had the characters, I just desperately wanted to play with them. And so I started in 1945, because at the end of 3 books, you have 3 generations of them. So the daughter in the first book is the mother in the second book, so on. And you end up pretty much at present time. But through all of that, in between book parts, there are flashbacks to earlier generations of the Kipsu, from 100 years ago, 500 years ago, 1,000 years ago, 2,000 years ago. And so the possibilities are basically endless.
Yeah. So I have a bunch of things. So one, I really like that you said it's like the Sith Lords, or like the Jedi, because that's what I thought of. Like, oh, it's mother and daughter, but it's very much also mentor mentee. It's very much like that, like Jedi and apprentice and Padawan, or Sith and apprentice. It's definitely that kind of relationship, even though they're also mother and daughter. So I picked up on that, and and also, I wanted to talk a little bit too about, I thought that it was really interesting, and you touched on this a little bit in what you just said, that the Kipsu are a we, right? Like you said, they're essentially cloning themselves. So there's a little bit of the same thing from generation to generation, but also they have their own personalities, they have their own identities. And I think in this book, Mia, I really liked Mia a lot. And Mia struggles, I think especially more so, at least I thought, than some of the other ones, than her mother. She especially struggles with that individual versus collective, and like what I want to do versus what my duty is, or what I should do, or what the collective wants to do. So where did sort of that struggle, and Sarah has that struggle at the very beginning, but she's kind of older as the book goes on. So it seems like the young ones always seem to have this struggle. And then they get older and they sort of settle into the collective duty. So I'm really interested in that concept, and how you did that and why.
Well, all right. So, and you're right. I mean, like a good chunk of the book is Mia's internal conflict between being Mia and being the Kipsu, and how she deals with it. And what I loved about creating these characters is it allows you to explore a bunch of different things that we've sort of all known, all experienced in one way or another, but like put it on steroids and just blow it up to a different level. So, we grew up and we're desperate for our own identity, right? We want to be our own person and not turn into our parents. And that takes a very different meaning if you're an exact copy of your mom, for example. At the same time, there's this sort of I don't know. It's even like it's unquantifiable. There's this immense pressure on her shoulder to continue this tradition and to live by those handful of rules that have guided her family for 3,000 years. So, and anyone who I don't know, whose family had a family business sort of dealt through that in one way or another. Like if you live if you grew up on a farm, there's this unbearable pressure to take over the farm at some point. Well, imagine the farm's been in your family for 3,200 years and you think you're saving the world. It's like, it's very difficult, and you struggle with your own desires, and you feel selfish about it. And so there were so many things to explore, like with Mia and Sarah's relationship, and watching her sort of realize that, yeah, we're unique and we're different than those that came before us, but at the same time, we're very much like them. Like there's a reason we turn into our parents. We were genetically, in large part, our parents, and some of that is unavoidable. But Mia still has a choice. She can embrace one or embrace the other, and she tries to find some peace through all that.
Yeah, and she is, and I really enjoyed her point of view in this book. So there's a couple of different points of view, but the main ones are Mia and Sarah, the mother and the daughter. But some of my favorite chapters were the flashback chapters, where we get to find out more about these past generations that you were talking about, and it goes back, all the way back. And I don't want to give any spoilers, because you find out information through those flashback chapters too, about why they follow the rules they follow and things like that. And that's why I really enjoyed those chapters. So I was wondering, and those chapters are for the readers for sure, because the characters are going on their own journey. Yeah. And the information about their past was sort of lost. With the 11, and now they're on the 100. So I'm interested as to why you included that information for the reader, but kept it from the characters.
Well, like I knew the reader would want to know more. And some of these flashbacks, Mia and Sarah are aware of. They have journals from their ancestors, but they don't go back far enough. The knowledge is lost at some point. They don't really know who or what they are, or really why they're doing any of this. They just know they're doing it. And so some of it they know. But as we dive into the book, and they struggle to find out more about themselves, we get to find out a little more than they do. And I thought it was an interesting way of first giving the reader what they want, but also to create a little bit of a divergence. So from the moment we know more about them than they do, we watch them go, and we know when they're making a mistake or when they're not, or so I thought it gave the reading experience like some depth.
Yeah, I agree with that. I really like those chapters, because it also showed too that even though they're the same, they're very different. All of those women throughout history were in different situations at different times and handled it in different ways. And I thought it was really cool to just sort of see the journey of the Kipsu and kind of why. And you're right, it did give me what I wanted as far as like the history or like knowing about them. It was really cool. And I really enjoyed that. And outside of those chapters, most of this book, it's in first person, and most of it is written in dialogue, which I found really interesting. It makes it read really fast. So, I was able to finish the book really quickly because it's mostly dialogue. But I was wondering about that choice as well. Why did you make that decision to go with mostly dialogue?
Well, it's in a way, I cheat a little bit in this one because you're also in their heads, right? So you can sort of hear and think at the same time. But most of it is indeed dialogue, mostly because I think there are two ways to go about telling a story. You could be as subjective as you want in telling it. So you could have an omniscient narrator who knows everything and tells you everything and says, this is happening and this person is feeling like this. Or you can have a more objective take on it. And I think dialogue is the most objective form of storytelling. because you get to know the characters the same way you would get to know someone in real life. Uh, and it is what it is, and how you interpret that is sort of up to you. Of course, I try to sort of guide you in the right direction, but I like to let you do some of the work, and figure things out for yourself. And if someone is brave, well, I'd rather not tell you she's brave. I'd rather show it to you, and things like that. But I think dialogue is super fun because we're not used to it in books. It's weird because like it's a very different reading experience, but we're so used to it in real life that it's like riding a bicycle. It comes back. Like you you get your bearings back, and you realize that you can actually get to know characters pretty well just listening to them speak. And in this case, you listen to them think. So that's a little easier.
Yeah, because you do hear their thoughts and hear their words, and it felt like a conversation. The whole book sort of felt like a conversation to me. Like, oh, I'm just like talking to Mia, and she's telling me what she's thinking about. that's like what it felt like. And even when it's not dialogue, you have letters in here, which feels like dialogue, right? Because it's the person in their own words sort of writing a letter and saying like, this is what they're going through. And the flashback chapters are not dialogue. Those are, I think, the only chapters that aren't mostly dialogue and thoughts. Those are just more prose and stuff. So I found it interesting too, because the flashback chapters sort of, it helped with the pacing, so that it wasn't like just constant dialogue, because that would have been really fast. So I sort of liked the way that you did that. You sort of put the letters in there and you put the flashbacks in there, and it all was paced very well.
Yeah, the flashbacks are set between the sections, and I wanted it to be like I call them entr'actes, but I really wanted them to be breaks from the main story. So you actually do stop, and then you get a different story told in a different narrative form. They're all in the third, so it's a more I don't know, sort of common way and to tell stories. So it'll feel slightly different, and then you go back, and then you take another break, and you have another one of these little stories. They're super fun to write.
And I could tell too that you had a lot of fun writing this book. I think that came through a lot, and I'm really interested in your characters too, Mia and Sarah, which we've talked about, but also the tracker, who we have not talked about, who is like the bad guy in this book, or one of, I guess, the main bad guy in this book is the tracker. And we get some point of view, a couple of point of view chapters from the tracker's point of view. And it's really interesting. I don't want to like be too spoilery about the tracker, but I do feel like I got like just enough about the tracker to be interested, and I'm really interested in this idea of who this character is and his relationship with the Kipsu. And of course, I don't like them or the current incarnation of them, but it's like I didn't get as much as I wanted. So I'm just wondering if we're gonna get more about the tracker later on. Not to say too much.
you get plenty more tracker down the road. I mean, the first book is really about like it's Sarah's and Mia's life, and so you understand who the Kipsu are, how their lives are organized, what the rules are in the world they live in. And there are these trackers, and you get a glimpse of them in there. It's more than a glimpse, I mean, but you could use more. So by the time you get to book 2, the rules have been established. You know the characters. Well, there's a new one to know, but you know she's still sort of, in part the same person, even though there's like a new person to get to know. You know it's a Kipsu. So the book 2 leaves a lot more room to the tracker, and in the first book you see them do really, really bad things, but you sort of get a sense that there might be a little bit more to them than just being these awful murderous beings, and you get way more of that in book 2, and you learn more about him and so on.
Awesome. I'm excited about that. Because I do want to know more about them. Even though it's terrible. But and here's the thing, and the tracker does bring this up in the book. And I don't think this is too spoilery, but I don't think necessarily that they're any more murderous than the Kipsu. They're just sort of murder for a reason.
Yeah. So one of the things I wanted to do there is not to have these incredibly perfect good characters and incredibly evil bad characters, and I thought they deserved more than that. And so the Kipsu are, they have you don't mess with them, that's for sure. They can be slightly homicidal when it push comes to shove, but you're right. You can tell they sort of start from the same place, but they made different choices along the way. And I think it's those choices that define them, but they're mostly because it's those choices that define you and me and everyone else. And it doesn't, in some way, it doesn't really matter what you start with. It's the choices you make along the way and who you choose to be that ends up really mattering. Because even though the Kipsu are not that different from the bad guys or from anyone else for that matter, because the rest of the people in the world are not amazingly good either. But they they make a choice, and that makes them the good guys. And I think they're the good guys. They're
definitely the good guys.
In a slightly different way than what we're used to.
Sure. I mean, it was super clear that they were the good guys. But I did find it interesting how you did give both, really. We get a little more than a glimpse of the tracker, but you with both the tracker and the Kipsu, we do get these like depths, right? Like it's not black or white, they're not just good or evil. You gave them these other properties that is like, you can kind of relate to why they're doing what they're doing. And even the tracker, as terrible as they are, and I didn't like them, you could still sort of understand it, right? It was like they're on a similar sort of journey, and like they're doing this bad stuff for a reason. And don't always agree with the reasoning, but it's still, it's like, okay, they have a reason. And so I just found it really interesting that these characters have depths to them. Like it's not just the Kipsu, I mean, they are the good guys, but they do bad things in order to ultimately get to what they want to do, which I liked, because you don't always see that with good guys in books.
No, and they exist at a time where the world is really messed up. So you have these really heroic people who volunteer to like cross an ocean to fight for something bigger than them and lose their lives for it. But you also have these incredibly evil characters everywhere. I mean, and they're running the world more or less. There aren't that many good guys in terms of world leaders and army leaders and whatnot. They're like, it's just nasty. And so science is also moving super fast in that time, but at a very high human cost. Like the first rocket to get to space was built in concentration camps. So this notion that certain things are expendable for, if you believe that the cause is great enough, I wanted to play with it a little bit and have people do things that are clearly wrong, like make the wrong assessment about something, and have people make a slightly more debatable assessment about what's a reasonable cost for getting to this. And so there's all kinds of moral questions about the cost of progress in general that are explored in different ways in the book and in the series.
Yeah, and I found it really interesting the way that you sort of weaved this historical fiction aspect because it's all, like you said, it starts in 1945. And like it's all terrible people. It's Nazis, and so you have this historical fiction aspect, and then you also have the rocket science space aspect of it as well, and the sci-fi alien aspect, and you sort of blend those really well. I thought so. I'm interested in your research process because of the both historical fiction, and there's like a lot of rocket science in this book. I don't know anything about rocket science, but there's a lot of rocket science in this book, and you have this whole section of like further reading at the end, which I found super interesting. You give like pieces of information, which I really enjoyed. So I'm glad that you put that in there. But tell us about your research, because I have to imagine it was pretty extensive for all the different aspects of this book.
Yeah, it was. But all my books are research extensive. Sleeping Giants was, I know nothing. The first thing you realize when you write books is you don't know anything about anything, right? So Sleeping Giants, I didn't know about governments or special ops or, the world and leaders and medals and squirrels. I mean, I had to learn things. History, for some reason, meant more reading, but it was way easier to research and to find because there's been so much written about the World War and the space race that, like, I didn't spend 8 days looking at close-up altitude maps of Syria like I did for Sleeping Giants. It was all like more traditional research like I did during my PhD. But I love this stuff. I mean, I research things that I have no business researching just because I enjoy it too much. But if you don't enjoy this writing books and doing what comes with it, then there's no point, right? So I let myself dig in and enjoy it more, and yeah, you get a little bit of rocket science and a little more history, and but I think it's fun.
Yeah, I think it's fun too. Can you give us a couple of like non-spoilery fun facts that you learned while you were researching?
Non-spoilery fun facts. Well, the beginning of the book, it says in the description, so Mia goes to Germany to exfiltrate Werner von Braun, the German scientist who built the V2 rocket, and to bring him back to the United States. And in the book, well, she's with him, but everything that happens actually happened for real. There are no events that don't exist in the book. Like, you'd be hard pressed to find historical documents that would contradict the history of what comes next. But the way von Braun escaped from Germany is insane. Like, it's unbelievable. If you wrote that as pure fiction, your editor would come back to you and say, well, when you get to this part, like, I'm talking about the letterhead, for example, like, this is too far-fetched, right? It makes absolutely no sense. But it did happen.
Oh, that really happened.
Absolutely.
Interesting. I didn't realize that.
Yeah. Well, you'll have to read the book or go online and read about von Braun. It's the same facts, but
Yeah.
well, there's a little bit of climate science in there, and one of the things you learn about in the book and in the further reading is how they measured, how they can know how much CO2 there was in the air before, because we started getting interested in this fairly recently in history. So how do you get old air to measure the CO2 in it? And I don't actually know how the discovery was made, but I love to believe that it happened in a way that is pretty close to the way I have it happen in the book between Mia and Sarah. But it has to do with ice, because when you make ice and you put it in the fridge, there are little bubbles that form in the ice. So in the freezer, I mean. So when you pick up the ice a week later, in there you have air from a week before. So you do actually have air from the past. And if you find old enough ice, well, then you have all the old air that you can dream of, and you can make measurements and do all sorts of crazy things. I thought it was super interesting.
That was really interesting. And I had just never thought about that before, right? But when I read it, I was like, this is cool. And
Yeah.
yeah. And this book, there was a lot of things in this book that made me want to like look up to see if it's true. Because like I know basics about this historical stuff, but I don't know, a whole lot about it. So it was definitely like, as I was reading, I was like, is this true? Did this really happen? Is this real? And it made me like go Google and like, yeah, most of it really did.
It's all true.
And all these people are real historical figures. So I also want to ask you a little bit about that, because we have these historical figures in here like von Braun and the Soviets, some of the Soviet folks as well. So we have like a lot of real figures in here that you used, but you also gave them their own sort of lives and personalities. And I wonder how much of that came from their real lives and personalities that you were able to gather versus what you made up.
I don't know. You read a bunch of stuff about these people, and you end up with an impression that is in large part based on fact, but also sort of like purely subjective. And if you read the book, you can tell that I like Sergei Korolev, the chief designer of the Russian program, a hell of a lot more than I like Werner von Braun. Yeah. There are obvious reasons. One was a SS officer and the other was not. But just watching films and watching him in interviews, and I mean, I did like a ridiculous amount of research for this. You sort of get an impression, and I was left with some sort of former Nazi used car salesman thing in my head, and it sort of shows in the writing. But you make decisions. And it's a little bit tricky writing people who actually existed, but I never say anything about them or have them do anything that they didn't do themselves. And I mean, von Braun is a controversial figure to begin with, and my version of him is not the most controversial at all. So I felt reasonably comfortable with him. Korolev is a little more secretive. There's not that much that's known about him on a personal level, but just reading, stuff about the way he interacted with other people and how he got along with politicians and other scientists, and you get this image in your head. And I don't know, I hope it's somewhat accurate.
Yeah, I was just wondering. It's like, yeah, I was wondering if you watch videos of them or whatever.
I do when I can.
And you also have in this book, there's a playlist at the back of the book, and you mentioned that at the beginning, and it pairs with the chapters, and it's songs from the years in which each chapter takes place, which I thought was really cool. And I'm just wondering why you did that. Like, what was your thought process with the playlist?
I was okay, so I had already sort of sketched what the book was going to be. I had the plot, I had the parts done, but I write super thin and then I layer it, so my chapters get bigger and bigger as I go along. And halfway through that, you have an idea of what book 2 is going to look like, and so you start taking notes on that. And then I heard Lola by the Kinks, and I had this image, and I started writing a chapter for book 2 before even really writing book 1. And I write to music a lot, but I usually write to the same music for whatever, like every scene. Like most of my books are Pat Benatar. It's about 60% of everything I published was written to Pat Benatar. But I thought this was super cool, writing a chapter, listening to a song that you associate with the chapter. So I thought, let's do the whole thing. So I listened to a bazillion songs from the 30s and 40s and 50s. And you really need a bazillion because they're all friggin' love songs, which don't fit with the storyline. So I found songs that were either the lyrics or the music or something inspired me, and I thought fit with what the chapter was about, either directly or sometimes sort of sarcastically. So you can have something super bad happen to a super happy song or type of thing. But I wrote the chapters to the songs, each of them, most of them. And it was a very different experience. But you'll see it if you read the book while listening to the songs. Once in a while, the song will change tempo, and the action in the rhythm in the chapter itself will also change more or less as you're getting to that part. It's hard to gauge how fast people read, but yeah. It was really, really fun. And I discovered amazing songs in the process too. Just for that, it would have been worth it for me because I learned a bunch. And I think people will enjoy the playlist, in part because we don't listen to oldies that much, in part because a lot of work went into the song selection. But I think the playlist is worth it even without the book.
Yeah, I think it's really cool. And the chapter names are the song titles, right? Yeah. So yeah, I found that a really cool thing to do that I hadn't seen before. I mean, I know that like authors write to playlists and stuff, but I never seen an author like include it in here and have it be such a part of the book. And I thought that was really cool that you did that. So so my other question is, so I get why this didn't happen in this book, but are we going to get to go to space?
I can't answer that.
I figured that.
But you will know at some point about how the Kipsu began.
That's cool. I clearly we have to by the end of the trilogy. That's a big thing. So I figured that was coming. Like we're gonna get the origin story of this, but yeah, I was like, maybe you can tell us if we go to space, but I figured not. But it was worth a try.
I'm thinking I don't often go to space, but in the Themis Files trilogy, I did go somewhere else in book 3. But not in a very space pew pew sort of way.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's why I didn't know how far into the future either this was gonna go. So I'm really interested to keep reading, I guess is what I'm saying, because I want to find all the things out about what happens in the story. And
yeah, the big question is how far do we go in the future, but also how far do we go in the past? Because that's where the answers are.
Exactly.
The future is full of uncertainties, and who knows, But the past, it's out there somewhere.
Yeah, that's where it's at. And one more question: when you wrote this, did you know it was going to be a trilogy? Like, did you plan it out as a trilogy? And how did you decide sort of where to end one book and where to start the next one?
That was super easy. I knew it was going to be a trilogy, in part because it's super hard to pitch an open series to a publisher. It's also practically not super interesting because the longer the series goes, the less potential for new readers that you have. So 3 is good. It actually makes sense. There's a reason why people do trilogies. Second, I knew I knew the characters before I knew what they were going to do, and they're mother-daughter pairs. So it was obvious from the beginning that each book was going to be one generation of the Kipsu. And I mean, in theory, I could start 3,200 years ago and have 99 of them. There could be 99 prequels to this book because they're the 99 generations, or 98 prequels. But starting from where I was, I knew where it would begin and where it would end. And it also, I had to be, somewwhat familiar with, see, it's easy to write one interlude chapter about what life was like, 3,000 years ago in some place I've never been, but to understand the daily struggles of people living in that era would require like about 10 times the research that I put in for this book. And I put in enough research in this book to get another PhD. So yeah.
So do you have any book recommendations for us? I always like asking authors this. Have you read good?
I have plenty. What did I read recently? Speaking of real scientists, The Oppenheimer Alternative by Robert Sawyer. It's set in roughly the same era. Von Braun is also in it. It's basically the world's biggest brains unite to save the planet from something. And I thought I had it hard. Every single character in the book is real. So you have Oppenheimer, Einstein's in there. Not a single person is made up. So if talking research, this is like other level. And it's really fun, especially if you know a little bit about the people in it. What else did I read? The Future is Yours, that came out yesterday by Dan Frey. It's epistolary sci-fi. Don't want to spoil it. I think it's one of those you want to go into like blind, but it's really good. There's a novella by Django Wexler coming out called Hard Reboot. It's coming out in a couple months. I don't know the date, but it's got giant robots beating the hell out of each other. That's what I've been reading recently.
Cool. I always like to hear what authors read and like. For my own purposes too, which is just for selfish reasons. So what is next for you? What are you working on now? Are you still working on this trilogy?
I am. I'm in book 3, but there's going to be work to do in book 2 again. It's going to be good because it's like this one is now, because it was coming out, you sort of, you ask questions and you reread it. And so and I'm writing book 3 right now. So book 2 is a little vague right now in my mind. It'll be good to go back to it. And yeah, I'll finish that. Then I really don't know. I'm
and you work on your samurai.
I will work on my samurai stormtrooper costume. I'm really crossing my fingers. There's a movie project about the test novella that I wrote with Tor.com that came out last year in 2019. It's a little book, about 100 pages. And I've had plenty of things optioned, but this project is sort of like there. It's like there. It has a director and a screenwriter, Gavin Hood, who did Ender's Game. It would star Payman Mahdi and John Boyega from Star Wars. Yeah, I mean, it's far enough advanced that if nothing goes wrong, maybe they'll start filming at some point. But COVID is weird. I don't know. Who knows? But I'm hopeful. And other than that, I don't know. I'll just go with the flow, I guess.
Cool. And one last question before I do plugs for your book. Although everyone should buy this book.
The book.
This is an arc. Wait, there we go. This is an arc of it, but the cover's basically the same. But
really pretty. I love my covers.
Yeah, it's very cool. It's got like spaceship on it. Anyway, that's what that is. If you can't see, it's like the in the background. It's like a spaceship diagram. But were there any cool like deleted scenes that hit the cutting room floor?
In this?
Yeah. If not, that's fine. But it's always interests me as well.
I'm thinking. I'd have to dig. Nothing comes to mind. There were zigs that were turned into zags here and there, but mostly, I think it has to do with the way I write. Like a lot of people will like write a boatload of words and eventually shrink it down to something else. So then you delete a bunch of stuff. I start by writing a 5,000 word book, more or less, sometimes less, and then I flesh it out. So the real big decisions I make very early on. So it wouldn't be like a big chunk that was thrown out. It would be a thing. Yeah.
Small, yes. That is very cool. Are you a plotter or a pantser? Do you do outlining or do you just write?
Oh, I'm a mega plotter. Yeah, I I need it. I really need it. Sometimes like, but I'm not. Sometimes you hit a wall, like you're plotting and you're plotting and you hit a wall, and then you leave a hole. So I'll leave a hole that I will fill later on, but I don't fill it when I get to it. I fill it, 30 chapters ahead. Eventually it all makes sense, and I thought, well, it should go there because I know where it will go in the end, but sometimes the in between will change a bit along the way. But yeah, I plot a lot.
Cool. So I think this is your correct website. Is this Neuvel.net?
If it's my name.net, it is. Yeah.
.net, yes, Neuvel.net. So that's where you can go to find Sylvain online. I know you're also on Twitter. I think you're just at Neuvel. Is that where you are everywhere online?
No, I'm at Neuvel on Twitter, and I'm at Sylvain Neuvel on Facebook and Instagram.
Okay, cool. So you can find him in all the places online as well, and follow if you're interested in that. I do have a photo of the cover here. Here we go. So this is the history of what comes next. Take Them to the Stars, book 1. And I enjoyed the book, and I highly recommend. Of course, I always want people to buy books, but I did really enjoy this one. So go ahead and buy it. We do have signed book plates. Hooray!
They're not just signed. I designed those book plates.
Did you design them?
Yeah,
They're really cool.
I made them.
That's really cool. I was wondering about that because I was like, these are super cool. So they're very special book plates.
Yeah. And there are a million of them. I mean, yeah, get a book plate. Buy the book.
Cool. There are not a million of them. I only have 20, so the first 20 people will get one. And they're very cool. So definitely get a book from us so that you can get a book plate because you won't get that from Amazon. And please, to order books, you can just go to the website, tubbingcruise.com, and click on place an order. It's pretty easy. And Sylvain's book is right there on the order form. You can literally just click on it, and that's all you have to do. So I've tried to make it as easy as possible to order books and all of that. So please order books and get a signed book plate. This book is really cool, and I think y'all will enjoy it. And thank you, Sylvain, for talking with me today. I really enjoyed this conversation. It was really fun.
Thank you so much for having me. That was really fun. I'm happy.
Awesome. And thank you, everyone, for watching. This will live on our YouTube channel. So if you missed it and you're watching it later, hello. And thank you for watching, whether it's now or in the future. It's another thing, kind of like your characters that can sort of live in the past and the future and everywhere, which is kind of cool. So thank you, everyone, for watching, no matter when. And thank you, Sylvain. And I will see y'all next time.
Thanks again. Thanks all.